Hello everyone and welcome to my The Bold and Beautiful Always channel. When Finn discovers Luna is still alive, he utters 5 stunning words. The Los Angeles County Coroner's Office was a sterile silence that seemed to be the prelude to forgetfulness. Beside Steffi, Dr. John Finn Finnegan stood erect, their features bleached white by the fluorescent lights. A figure covered in a stark white sheet lay in front of them on a chilly stainless steel gurney. Death's crushing finality and the smell of antiseptic lingered heavy in the air. This was the sinister setting for Luna Nozawa's heartbreaking, perplexing tale, a lively young lady who died in the tumultuous aftermath of Sheila Carter's funeral, apparently due to a catastrophic, unintentional overdose of Poppy's special mints, a poisonous concoction posing as a stress reliever. With her own sorrow for Luna battling with a great protectiveness for her husband, who had to endure the dreadful burden of breaking the news to Poppy, Steffi gripped Finn's arm. The indescribable visual proof of a tragedy that had already rocked their fragmented world was going to be pulled back, the sheet. With his physician's mind fighting the emotional assault, Finn's jaw was tightened, bracing himself for the sight of Luna's motionless features, a final punctuation point on a life cruelly cut short. He gave the solemn attendant a curt nod. Time continued as the sheet whispered back, exposing Luna's face. It broke. It was an incorrect sight. Deeply, horrifyingly incorrect. Yes, Luna lay motionless and pale. However, Finn did not see the waxy pallor, the imperceptible settling, the complete lack of cellular vigor that he had expected in death. Rather, while being pale, her skin had a ghostly, translucent look, as if it were alabaster illuminated from within by a dim, impossibly weak fire. Her slightly opened lips had a subtle, dusky pink undertone, not the blue-tinged color of hypoxia. Her chest. Finn's breath caught as his trained eyes narrowed, analyzing the scene with an abrupt, intense focus. Was that? Ignoring the attendant's scowl and Steffi's gasp next to him, he leaned forward. Something different, not the agonizing, shallow breaths of a dying body. There was an almost imperceptible tidal rhythm underlying the silence, something unimaginably deep and sluggish. A beat that is measured in minutes rather than seconds. His fingertips located the pulse spot at her neck with the automatic accuracy of his line of work. He had no expectations. Dead, cold skin. But there was a pulse beneath his fingertips. Faint. Slow. Like a drumbeat echoing across miles of land in the distance. However, it is indisputable. A heartbeat. Finn? Steffi said in a tremulous whisper, observing the profound change in his face as the unbelief clashed with the emergence of an inconceivable hope. He didn't respond. His thoughts was already moving quicker than his hands, and he was already moving. Reaching into his pocket for a penlight, he carefully pried open one of Luna's eyelids. The pupil reacted to light, although it did so slowly and barely. Not brain death's dilated, fixated stare. Reflex. Present but primitive. He silenced the room and his own pounding heart by pressing his stethoscope over her chest. He strained to listen. Not quiet. Not the meaningless lack of life. A noise. Quiet, muted, but clear. The resonant, deep, and sluggish loop-dub of a heart beating at a rate of maybe 10 beats per minute. Neither the flatline of death, neither the panicked tachycardia of overdosing. A metronome set to geological time, a heartbeat in suspended animation. Get me an EG, stat. And a full talk screen rerun, now. Finn's normally composed voice broke the stillness of the mortuary with a whip-like crack. The attendant's bewilderment gave way to anxiety as she jumped. Dr. Finnegan, the identification is confirmed, the paperwork. Finn yelled, now, and the sound reverberated off the chilly tiles. The attendant acted frantically as he said, this woman is not dead. She's in an extended hypothermic coma. Get the damn machines. His voice had a terrible authority and was backed by unquestionable medical data. With her hand covering her mouth in tears of disbelief replacing those of anguish, Steffi gazed. Is Luna still alive? How? The hours without vital signs, the chilly water, the overdose? Controlled anarchy was the blur that ensued. Luna was sent back to the hectic bustle of the Cedars-Sinai emergency room rather than to the mortuary drawer that was waiting for her. Dr. Finnegan, who commanded the resuscitation suite with intense, focused determination, replaced Finn as a mourning family friend. He yelled directives for intracranial pressure monitoring, progressive rewarming procedures, and specific antidotes designed to sustain a body coming out of deep metabolic hibernation rather than to revive. Not brain death, but a deep coma that resembled death was confirmed by the initial EEG. This was probably caused by the strange combination of the icy plunge into the pool and the strong mint toxins, which Finn now believes contain synthetic opioids and strong neuroinhibitors. Luna's metabolism had been forced to almost zero by the hypothermia, leaving her brain and organs in a condition that was indistinguishable from death based on crude exams carried out in the tumultuous wake of Sheila's funeral. It was a near impossible medical miracle, the Lazarus phenomenon, which is uncommon but recorded and happens in the most horrifying, exceptional situations. A few hours later, Luna was in the intensive care unit, ICU, still in a profound coma, but alive and attached to a symphony of devices. Her vitals were there, albeit extremely delicate, and her body temperature was gradually increasing. Finn stood staring at her through the observation window, a deep, shuddering wonder battling with tiredness. With her own astonishment giving way to cautious, weeping relief, Steffi stood next to him, her arm wrapped through his. The words "she's fighting, Finn," Steffi whispered. "She's still here." However, Finn's eyes weren't just on Luna. It was focused on Poppy Nozawa, who was crumpled on an adjacent waiting room chair. Poppy appeared completely ruined. Days of unrelenting tears had ruined her face, and her eyes were empty pits of anguish. She had been informed of the confirmation in the mortuary, which was the last straw for her intolerable guilt. She placed all the guilt on herself, blaming her daughter's death indirectly on her secrets, her mints, and her poisonous coping techniques. Lost in an impenetrable veil of self-recrimination, she had been waiting numbly for Luna's body to be released. She had not yet been informed about Luna's battle for survival in the intensive care unit or the impossible discovery in the mortuary. The utter knowledge of her own damnation enveloped her as she sat. Finn observed her. He witnessed her shoulders trembling with silent sobbing and the depth of her shame. He observed the origin of the poison that had almost killed Luna. And as he relived the events leading up to Sheila's funeral, the odd tension between Sheila and Poppy before to the turmoil erupting, and the way Sheila always appeared to be circling Luna, he noticed something else that crystallized in his mind with terrifying clarity. Luna's fall at Sheila's burial was an odd coincidence. The mints contained certain, uncommon poisons that, in the correct circumstances, could cause paralysis and even death. Trauma and medical knowledge sharpened Finn's thinking, which made the terrible connections. It wasn't merely a coincidence. It was sabotage. Specifically targeted. Malevolent. He was aware of his obligations. The 5 words weren't predetermined, rather, they were formed in the blazing furnace of his rage and his intense need to expose the deception Poppy was living in. He untangled himself from Steffi softly. "Stay with Luna," he murmured in a somber and hushed voice. The fluorescent lights were painful on Poppy's shattered body as he entered the waiting area. She was absorbed in her own little hell and didn't look up. Finn came to a stop just in front of her. The tension of unthinkable realities made the air crackle. He was not consoling. He made no concessions. He spoke as if delivering surgical blows, each one exploding in the silent chamber like a grenade. "Sheila Carter poisoned your daughter, Poppy." The impact was immediate and disastrous. Poppy's head jerked upward. Her wide, incomprehensive, bloodshot eyes met Finn's. She felt as though the words were hitting her. Are you poisoned, Sheila? Its utter, terrible impossibility struck into the foundation of her shame. Her already pale face turned completely white. Her hands began to shake violently and convulsively. Her mouth opened, but a choking, guttural moan was all that came out. The meticulously crafted story of her unintentional transgression collapsed, to be replaced by the terrifying scene of Sheila, the woman she mistrusted and loathed, purposefully killing her kid. It was awful to know that the weapon had come from her own weakness, the secrets, the mints. However, the intent and the objective were unimaginable. At last, Poppy rasped, "S.H. Sheila?" The name was a sob, a query, and a curse. Poisoned. Luna? But, the mints, my mints. The guilt fought with a rising, violent, and terrifying fear. The blow was not lessened by Finn. He had flint eyes. He paused, allowing the horrifying fact to gnaw at him more deeply. Your mints were the delivery system, Poppy. But the toxin? The intent? That was Sheila. She spiked them. She targeted Luna. At her own funeral. Luna didn't just overdose. She was murdered. And she nearly succeeded. Luna's alive in spite of Sheila, not because of anything else. She's fighting in there because her body miraculously hid her from death's door. Sheila tried to kill her. Poppy sounded like an injured animal. The dam cracked. Her whole body ached as raw, raspy sobs ripped from her throat. The realization seemed to literally dissect her, as she doubled over and clutched her gut. A tsunami of pure, burning fury and a horror so deep it took her breath joined the guilt, which still weighed heavily on her. Sheila. Her daughter had been attempted to be taken by Sheila. She was the unintentional assassin that Sheila had used. The deadly venom of knowing her child had been preyed upon by a monster had now been combined with the anguish she had been wallowing in. Standing over her, Finn was a grim avenger bringing the awful but essential truth rather than consolation. Poppy's world had been shattered by his 5 words, Sheila Carter poisoned your daughter, Poppy. They had also reframed a tragedy as an attempted assassination, transformed crushing guilt into a clear call for vengeance, and revealed Sheila Carter's true, lingering evil, whose malice extended beyond the grave she had so dramatically vacated. The steady beep of Luna's heart monitor down the hall, a delicate heartbeat resisting the gloom Sheila had attempted to impose, was starkly contrasted with Poppy's broken sobbing echoing across the waiting room. The specter of Sheila's long-lasting, poisonous hatred and the broken mother who finally saw the enemy's true face added a horrifying new dimension to the fight for Luna's life. Finn's disclosure wasn't the end, rather, it was the explosion that set off a war driven by maternal rage and the valiant struggle of a daughter trying to survive against insurmountable odds. Only the chilling echo of those 5 words and the unrelenting, defiant beep, 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 from Luna's chamber could break the stillness that followed Poppy's cries. Lee's startling disclosure. Lee Finnegan stood alone in her sleek, modern kitchen late at night, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound as she stared blankly at a sealed manila envelope on the marble countertop, an envelope that contained the truth she'd buried for years, a truth so explosive it could destroy not only her carefully cultivated reputation as a respected doctor but also her relationship with Finn, her son, her pride, her reason for existing, and as she poured herself a glass of wine with a trembling hand. The weight of that secret settled heavily on her chest like an anchor dragging her into the depths of guilt, regret, and desperation, because for years she had told everyone that she had adopted Finn through a reputable agency overseas, that his biological parents had been tragically killed in an accident, and that she had taken him in as an infant, raised him with love, given him the best life possible. But it was all a lie, one that began in a sterile hospital corridor over 3 decades ago. When a desperate young woman had given birth to a baby boy under the name Baby Doe, a woman strung out on drugs, a woman whose face Lee remembered all too well even now, especially since she had seen it again recently, on the face of Sheila Carter. Yes, Lee had known from the very beginning who Sheila was, had recognized her name in the adoption paperwork that she later doctored and destroyed, and made a vow then and there that she would raise Finn as her own and ensure that woman would never be a part of his life, ever, because Lee had seen enough in the psych ward reports and criminal profiles to know that Sheila was chaos incarnate, a master manipulator, and so when Finn grew up asking questions about his heritage, Lee gave him a story, a simple, tragic one, and told herself it was for his own good, that she was protecting him from a nightmare. But now, years later, everything was unraveling. Sheila was back, claiming maternal rights, forcing her way into Finn's world, and though Lee had pretended to be shocked, to be disgusted, to accuse Sheila of lying, deep down she had known it was true, and that her own lies were about to implode. It had started with the DNA test. Lee had swapped samples, paid a tech to fudge the results, and when that didn't work, she tried to sabotage Sheila's attempts to bond with Finn by feeding Steffi doubts and reminding her of Sheila's horrific past, but none of it was enough. And now Finn was asking questions again, questions Lee couldn't answer. Without confessing to a lifetime of deception, worse still, there was more, so much more, because the secret didn't end with Sheila. There was another child, one no one knew about, not even Finn, a daughter Lee had hidden away years ago, a result of a night she never talked about, a night when she had lost control and made a mistake that turned into a life, and that child, Luna, was her biological daughter. Not her niece as she had always claimed, and when Poppy had shown up in town, dragging Luna into the Forrester orbit, Lee had panicked, terrified that the truth would surface, that someone would dig too deep and realize that the timelines didn't add up, that Lee had been in the same hospital maternity ward where Poppy supposedly gave birth, and that Luna's blood type matched Lee's and not Poppy's. The truth was that after giving birth, Lee had convinced Poppy, who had her own troubles and was desperate for a way out, to take the baby and raise her as her own in exchange for financial help and a clean slate, and Poppy had agreed, though the guilt had slowly eaten away at them both, leaving their relationship strained and tense for years. Now, with Luna getting closer to Finn, with everyone blissfully unaware that they were half-siblings, Lee felt the walls closing in, the clock ticking louder every day, and as she clutched the envelope containing Luna's original birth certificate, one with her own name typed in the mother field, she realized that the house of lies she built was about to collapse. She thought of Finn's face when he found out the truth about Sheila and winced, imagining how much worse it would be when he found out that not only had she lied about Sheila, but that she had allowed him to grow close to his half-sister without ever saying a word, risking a scandal, emotional trauma, and potential incest if things had taken a romantic turn, and all for what? Command? Pride? The delusion that you're the ideal mother? Upon hearing the soft creak of the front door opening, Finn coming home from the hospital shift she thought she'd have time to prepare for, she realized the decision had just been made for her. Her stomach turned at the thought, and as tears filled her eyes, she realized that she was at a crossroads. She could keep the secret, destroy the papers, and hope that the universe never forced her hand, or she could come clean, face the fallout, ask for forgiveness, and hope that somewhere inside Finn's heart was still the boy who believed she could do no wrong. Unaware that Steffi had followed Finn home after overhearing a portion of Lee's conversation with Poppy earlier that day and was now hovering just outside the kitchen window, having caught enough to know something was horribly, shockingly wrong, she tucked the envelope under a nearby cushion and wiped her face casually, swallowing the confession for one more night.